Hi, I'm Abby. I've covered Eno, CBGBs, and punk for the past 3 weeks. What's the most ridiculous topical transition I could make in this moment? So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. What have I been up to lately? Oh, a Gabor Szabo discography overview, a podcast episode about Leonard Cohen's muse, Mariana Elin. Oh yeah, my first feature! Tracking Angle let me write their Record Store Day feature this year. I wrote about all the places I shopped at, a little bit about what I picked up, just my thoughts on the whole Record Store Day thing as a whole. I have a review of Sonic Youth's Record Store Day exclusive coming soon, part 2 of that Devoe overview, and you all wonder why I phased out miniseries on this show. I have work! Podcasts, recent articles, Sonic Youth review if that's up by now. All of that will be linked in the description, as is everything else. Phew. Even though I plan episodes months in advance, I didn't, sit down and rub my little hands together and plan how chaotic of a transition this would be. It's just that this group has been requested for several years at this point. It's been 6 months since I last featured a prog band. This group is overdue for a feature. This week's album is... Yes?
Are all of your breakthroughs phrased like that?
Are all of my breakthroughs a British prog rock band from the 70s? Because, yes.
Fragile. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my post tab. That's where I post the hints to what the next album is gonna be. I make announcements, I host polls. You can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written versions of my reviews on my website, linked in the description. I may be stuck in this weird polyester nylon blend shirt because that's what happens when I cover an album from the early 70s. Once upon a time, this had a cool collar, it was supposed to do up like this. I don't know where the hell that button went. This thing doesn't have to be. Let's take the plastic off. So my copy is a repress from 1977, according to Discogs, and I can't remember if this was purchased at the old location of In the Moment Records in Brattleboro, if you know you know, or if this was sent to my P.O. box at one point. I know this is the second copy of Fragile that has passed through my hands. Neither of my copies have ever had the booklet. I know the Fragile booklet exists and it has photos of the band in it and some explanations about the meanings of the songs that they wrote, but I have never had it in my hands, and unfortunately I can't show you that in my B-roll today. Where we are missing some of the odds and ends, we do still have the jacket, so let's talk about this cover art. The Fragile cover presents Yes's First by illustrator Roger Dean. The first of a career-spanning relationship between artist and band. Save for a couple covers in the 80s, Roger Dean has drawn for every single Yes album, up to the one that's coming out this year. One version of the Roger and Yes origin story states that Roger just so happened to have this illustration, an intergalactic amphibious aircraft orbiting an Earth-like planet as it splits from the inside, in the portfolio he submitted to Atlantic Records. Another version of the story states that the art came about after Roger met Yes. They had this idea to put a photograph of a fractured plate on the cover, which Roger transformed into this piece. Phil Carson at Atlantic connected Roger to Yes's manager, Brian Lane. After the Time and a Word cover debacle, Brian turned to Roger to create something a little less controversial. Looking at this cover, we get a sense of Roger's instantly recognizable art style. Large, viscous figures and his color palette. Save for the Osibisa cover and this Uriah Heep cover, I own both of these albums, but they're both in my office, and I do not want to deal with that right now. Roger hardly ever uses red. This is his comfort zone, greens and blues. Not to mention the fluid, interlocking lines in the text and lots of gradient from dark values to light. The latter three elements, color, value, and stylized text, are so quintessentially Roger Dean that that's all he had to do for the Close to the Edge cover. Of course, when you open the gatefold, we get a continuation of the world on Fragile. Roger redid this cover for the 2018 Steven Wilson mix. I don't like the black sky. I think there's a much better visual harmony between the greens and this rich, dark blue, almost purple. Opening up the gatefold, this is where the booklet would be if I had one. I just have the liner notes and the lyrics. Roger himself wasn't fond of the work he did for Fragile. This might be why he redid it for the remix. Quote, "It wasn't one of the most striking of all the Yes covers. I was kind of learning my trade at the time." On Fragile, we have, I don't know if there is a classic lineup of Yes to speak of, because like 3 different lineups would fall in that period, but whatever. We've got John Anderson on vocals, Steve Howe on guitar and backing vocals, Chris Squire on bass, and backing vocals, Rick Wakeman on the keys, plus Mellotron and Minimoog, and Bill Bruford on drums and various percussion. Fragile was produced by Yes with Eddie Offord. Roll transition. So here we are, nearly 5 years into this show and the first appearance of Yes. Will Romano said, quote, "Rarely has a rock band, let alone a progressive one, embodied so many contradictory musical traits and remained intact, in one form or another, important fucking distinction there, across a span of 5 decades. Yes, every album, every song author Stephen Lamb said, I can think of few groups that have had so many lineup changes and yet so many members that have left the band and later rejoined. A band that have had so many different methodologies and motivations for creating music. A band that has been so divided by interband politics and squabbles over money. It's all the rock and roll cliches rolled into one, especially the prog ones. The stage dramatic, sci-fi art, infighting, and glittery capes, all of this is prog rock iconography, and all of it came from Yes. Okay, maybe Keith Emerson had the dramatics beat. For our intents and purposes, here's what you need to know about Yes as a group. 3-part vocal harmonies, which Chris Squire brought from his choir boy background, a classically trained organist, who right now in the story is Tony Kaye, and a teenage drummer at the very beginning of his career. With the musical DNA of these 3, the band goes from British R&B to experimenting with jazz structures, and I'm sorry, I can't get over this stupid fucking spinning head! Yes's first album is their most pop effort, with covers of The Byrds and The Beatles, and the gorgeous original Sweetness. Then they followed the path of the Moody Blues and Deep Purple. I have never gotten to hold up this jacket in a video before. And they tried the orchestra rock thing with Time and a Word. When Steve Howe joins Yes in 1970-ish, he pushes the band towards writing originals. In early 1971, Yes issue the Yes album. DJ Ed Siaki, who had just started his tenure at WMMR that year, did a lot of heavy lifting for Yes. He made the singles off this record local hits in Philly, and from there it spread. Yes make their live debut in the States in April, supporting Jethro Tull 10 years after, the Jay Giles Band, and Black Sabbath. Now that's a bill I want to see. And they were outshining the groups they opened for. Bill said, quote, "We wiped the floor with the other bands." Steve said the success of the Yes album, quote, "encouraged us to be experimental again and just, I'm back in the fucking building again!" Quote, "Go for it." The challenge was to be extremely original and competent on the next album. The success of the Yes album also triggered an arms race between the band and their peers. Eddie Offord, who produced Fragile as well as ELP, said, quote, "Everyone was just trying to outdo everyone else to see who could be more adventurous, more cutting edge, and who could go the furthest. Both of them, meaning Yes and ELP, clearly had one eye on what everyone else was doing to see if they could do it better. What do Led Zeppelin have that we don't? A PA? Cool, let's get a PA. Who's got a Hammond organ? Do the Moody's have a Hammond? We've got to have a Hammond. What do King Crimson and ELP have? The Moog! Tony Kaye relented and used one on this record, but he wouldn't formally adopt it. Ergo, upon returning to England to support Elton John, Yes was looking to give Tony the boot. Bill said, quote, "It was definitely a case of ambition, and there was no loyalty at all. If Mitch Mitchell had become available, I probably would have been history." The scent of success was in the air, and now it was like a pack of hounds in full cry. Success was in our grasp, and yet, time was running out. The band asks manager Brian Lane if he might know anybody that would take Tony's place. He recommends Rick Wakeman. He's got the classical training. He's got the wizard dress. The music press loves him. He'll give most anyone an interview in exchange for a pint. Most importantly, Rick's got a mini Moog. Picture this. Rick has just gotten home after 3 completely booked out session days. This call from Chris Squire wakes him up at 3 o'clock in the f***ing morning. Do you know what time it is? Hold on a minute. It's 2:45. I know what the bloody time is! I've gotta be up at 6 o'clock for a jingle session! Quote, "I woke up the next morning and said, who the hell was that on the phone? Roz, his wife, told me what had happened. So I raked through my record collection and pulled out Yes's Time and a Word. I played it and thought, yeah, this is interesting. Maybe I shouldn't have said no to Yes after all." The guys met up at Rick's natural habitat, the pub, to discuss terms. Yes are leaving for another tour soon, and Rick once again says no, for reasons even he doesn't completely understand. I went home and thought, I must be mad. I mean, someone had offered me a really good job with a band I really admired, and I was holding out. I thought, what a Burke, and went back and joined immediately. Almost immediately after he joined, Yes began recording Fragile in earnest. They had Roundabout, they had South Side of the Sky, and they had Heart of the Sunrise at the end. Everything in between was shorter, individual compositions. As writers, John and Chris, and sometimes Steve, got a bigger share of the royalties. This method was a way for other players to get a bigger slice of the pie, while Steve said that everyone had the chance to shine with an album structured this way. Chris was a lot more cynical. He said it was a way to cut costs after spending so much money on Rick's equipment. And it was a way to cut time. They only had a month at Advision for this thing, or so they say. The generally agreed on time frame for Fragile recording is between August and September of 1971. But the June 5th issue of The Melody Maker quotes Brian saying Yes were away in the country recording new material, and they wanted to get it on record before playing any more dates in Britain. Now, this could have been the soundtrack for the unrealized film Peace, announced back in April, but who knows. This fractured way of recording, where everyone contributes songs, is also a symptom of competition, with ELP in particular. Don't get it twisted, Yes, we're not faring much better. While Roger Dean attributed the Fragile title to the stability of planet Earth, Bill has said it was a reflection of the band's inherent instability. Or, if Brian Lane is to be believed, the title was a happy accident, because he saw a photo of Yes's last gig with Tony Kaye, and the word fragile stenciled on a road case. But even Bill conceded that as messy and inefficient as all the infighting was, their individual points of view were a strength of Yes. Quote, "Looking back on those days, one of the most unique things about Yes was that we all came from such different backgrounds. Most bands of that era came from the same street or city block. Yes wasn't from anywhere. You couldn't have picked people from a more abstruse social background to gather together." The track listing of Fragile goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Roundabout, followed by Cans and Brahms, with the subtitle Extract from Brahms' 4th Symphony in E minor.
Yeah, E minor, alright, yeah!
Third movement. Next, we have Heaven, and side 1 closes with South Side of the Sky. Opening up side 2, we have 5% for Nothing, followed by Long Distance Runaround, which segues right into The Fish, subtitle Scindalaria Prematuris? It's the best stab I can take at it. Then, Mood for a Day, and the album closes with Heart of the Sunrise. Fragile was released sometime in late 1971, potentially early 1972. Once again, we have a case of the release date on Wikipedia being fucking wrong. So they cite an October 23rd, 1971 issue of Sounds, which reports the Fragile date being pushed back to November 12th. However, I've combed through all available issues of The Melody Maker on the World Radio History Archive from the year 1971. An interview with Rick in the latest available issue from the week of December 18th reports Fragile being bootlegged as it's still awaiting an official release date. Of course, 1972 is where the archives issues of The Melody Maker and Disc and Music Echo magically drop off. Rock's back pages count your days. Why was Fragile's release pushed back so much? Because Your Move off the previous LP was still on the charts in the States. This is unheard of nowadays, with artists eager to clog the entire top 10 at once, but it used to be common practice not to issue your next single or album until the previous one had slipped off the charts. Of course, this didn't apply to, like, the Beatles in 1964. They went crazy in the paint, but think of how Strange Days was screwed up because the Doors' self-titled album was still on the charts like 6 months later. A very truncated Roundabout was released as Fragile's promo single. While we may think it's sacrilege to touch the track, this single version helped break Yes in the States. It peaked at number 13 the week of April 15th, 1972. All of the prog albums I've covered on this series were either released at the very dawn of the genre or 1973-74 when it was on its way out. I was surprised to read a somewhat positive review of Fragile by Richard Croman for Rolling Stone. Quote, "The Yes people have a lot to be excited over. Gorgeous melodies, intelligent, carefully crafted, constantly surprising arrangements, concise, I don't know about that, but certainly, quote, energetic performances, cryptic but evocative lyrics. When all these are present, Yes is quite boggling, and their potential seemingly unlimited." But Richard's being realistic here, and he's got a lot of the same hang-ups that a lot of the rock critics did with prog at the time. They're good, and they know it. So they tend to succumb to show-off syndrome. Cans and Brahms and We Have Heaven seem, quote, designed only to impress and tries too hard to call attention to itself. Is anyone really still excited by things like 5 tracks on this album are individual ideas, personally arranged and organized by the 5 members of the band, etc. But South Side of the Sky really won Richard over. Fragile peaked at number 4 in the US, and number 7 in the UK, propped up by more intense touring. Yes returned to the States in February of 1972, and they'd already started recording what would become Close to the Edge. Now, all this critical acceptance and commercial success was setting Yes up for either a massive success, that's a lot of rhymes in one line, I did not mean for that to happen, or a self-indulgent topographic oceans level blunder. Wait, no. It's just occurred to me that yes, themselves made topographic oceans. Anyway, John has a minor crisis in wake of this sudden windfall of money and attention. He reads Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha. That inspires Close to the Edge, the song. That is a story for another day. In the Yes canon, Fragile stands as the album that, of course, broke them in the States, got more people hip to their sound and what they were doing. Roger Dean's art established that moving forward. Heart of the Sunrise was featured in Buffalo 66. But about 40 years after Fragile's release, Roundabout was used as the bumper theme of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. That's right, we're talking about the Roundabout meme. To Be Continued becomes a meme like 4-ish years after that, if my memory serves me correctly, and Roundabout takes on a life of its own. Yes have neither shunned nor embraced the Roundabout meme. Take notes, Robert Fripp. Looking back, Steve said, quote, "I don't think we'll ever have another record like Fragile," which I think is a terrible waste. That technique of featuring the band and the individual all on one record was probably why we were so happy. Rick added, "The tragedy was, after that, Fragile and Close to the Edge, nothing was ever written with all of us in the same room at the same time. Those two albums were done like a giant jigsaw, with everybody linking up ideas, and it was very exciting. We never again sat together in a room to write," which, to some extent, I think was quite sad. Hindsight is a wonderful word, but it's useless. So, what do I think of Fragile? My main challenge this week was not to treat Fragile as simply Roundabout and everything else. There is a whole album here with distinct voices and influences. Roundabout does take up a lot of real estate. But I want to start my review with this statement. Given the emphasis put on Fragile's together but individuals ethos, ironically, the best tracks on the album are the group compositions. Okay, so a whole paragraph of Will Romano's Mountains Come Out of the Sky, named after the line on Roundabout, is dedicated to how the guys got this one sound. I'll spare you of that long-winded explanation and condense it for you. Basically, what Rick did was he played an E minor to C chord, they ran that tape backwards and faded in on it. And that stops right when Steve comes in. Steve said, quote, "I would not play blues cliches for love nor money." His style here is influenced by classical guitar. Given his favoring of his large-bodied acoustic instrument, Steve was concerned that playing on an acoustic guitar would get lost in the fray with everything else going on. So again, it's ironic that his lick is half of the iconic bit of Roundabout. The other bit, of course, Chris's bass line. Not since the Buddy Holly lick have I had to critique something so thoroughly ingrained in 2010's internet culture. It's really hard for me to set that cultural context aside. I'm sorry, I lived the height of the Roundabout meme. I made Roundabout memes! But I will say that Chris has an ear for chromatics and melodies. His part may dominate, but it fits into the jigsaw puzzle perfectly. Steve strums way up the fretboard, and him and Rick trade off licks. Some of those flourishes started their lives as stuff that Steve played in rehearsal. I'll also say that every part was recorded well. This goes for Roundabout and every other song on the record. Even on my copy, which has some mileage, there's good separation between drums, guitar, bass, and vocals, with Rick kind of acting as the connective tissue. In and around the lake, mountains come out of the sky, and they stand there. The lyric was partly inspired by driving through the countryside while yes, we're on the road, partly inspired by a whole lot of weed. Roundabout is an example of prog songs with nonsensical lyrics. See, the music, dance, and sing. They make the children really ring. I spend the day your way. Okay. We're focusing more on the feeling of being on the road. Fragile is such a road album. Listen, he sings it with conviction. He's got me singing along, even though I don't know what he means. Bill said, I was never fussed about John Anderson's lyrics because to me, they were vocals with phonetics. I wasn't after literal meaning. I didn't really care if the mountain came out of the sky and stood there or not, because the words had enough information for me in their sound and rhythm. Were they any good? I don't know. When you can't see people's mouths moving or hear what they're saying, the luxury of monitors didn't exist back then. You use the rhythm of the words. The last record I covered with Bill Bruford on it was Lark's Tongues in Aspic. Holy moly, he grew leaps and bounds as a drummer in less than 2 years. He's not trying to show off to the older kids, per se, on Fragile, but you can tell he hasn't quite stepped out of the box yet. Roundabout has a pretty sensical linear build. Start with a basic rhythm. Use snare to accent a different consonant, bass notes, or join spaces between. Go crazy with the percussion on the gallop, and holy sh*, there's a cowbell! About 16 edits made up Roundabout, according to Rick. When you have such a heavily edited composition, it's not guaranteed that it'll come together, right? When you're so in it, you can't see the forest for the trees. Sometimes you get lost in the sauce. Yes had one foot on the ground while putting together Roundabout, because we have recognizable, repeated motifs, like in classical music. Rick's organ part comes in to introduce the second verse. When we hear it again, it piques our ear, but oh, this time we're delighted by the surprise of the gallop. Steve's first solo is repeated. He brings the classical bit back, with Rick's trills underneath. And there's the harmonies, of course. They kind of stitch this weird, winding roundabout together. I don't think Chris comes in until more than halfway through the song, so we're working with 2 parts, and then 3. Again, a sensical build. It's like salting your food, right? You can always add more later, but once you've added it, you can't really take it out. Mountains come out of the sky, they stand there. No resolution like we want. It allows the song to keep going. Rick's nickname among the session players in town was One Take Wakeman. He banged out his solo in 1 take. And we don't even know there isn't resolution until the very end, when we change this to this. With Roundabout, Steve said the goal was to be as tight as Booker T and the MGs or James Brown's band. They certainly live up to the former. Roundabout shows us what Yes can do when they collaborate. Then we get to the individual stuff, which is a mixed bag. I gotta say, with this deal, Rick got shafted. And this is why. Yes had their publishing deal. Remember, this is the 70s. Publishing, the record contract, and distribution were all separate entities, so their publishing was through Warner Brothers. Rick was still tied up in all his old recording contracts from when he was in the Strawbs, so he couldn't submit to Warner. Instead of writing something new for his solo Fragile contribution, he reworked a classical piece by Brahms. Rick didn't like Brahms and cans. I don't either. It's the weak point of the album, and putting it after a highlight like Roundabout just strangles it even harder. We could have cut this, and we wouldn't have missed a thing. We Have Heaven doesn't lend much to Fragile either. It's very folksy, telling the moon and the March hare he is here or something. John got a little wrapped up in the idea of the vocal round. A rolling idea of voices and things, as he described it. I don't think he could quite translate his idea to the tangible. South Side of the Sky, however. This is my favorite cut on the record. This deserves more recognition. I'm a sucker for a prog band with a wind machine. According to the liner notes, South Side of the Sky is about a doomed Arctic exploration. Then you have the explanation given in the Yes Songs text. Sleep is death's little sister. This philosophical idea comes from the Talmud, but it's rooted in reality. If you fell asleep in the snow, you'd slip into hypothermia and die without even knowing it. Then you have the lyric itself. A million miles away it seemed from all of eternity. Move forward was my friend's only cry, in deeper to somewhere we could lie. The warmth of the sky, of warmth when you die. Is this a suicide mission, or is the mountain Yes's way of articulating the hump of achieving spiritual enlightenment, freeing your soul of this fucking wheel? Samsara, bitch! This interpretation isn't a stretch. John did read Siddhartha, and lots of rock and roll musicians in the 70s were interested in Eastern philosophies. Bill plays a heart palpitation. That's the only way I can describe his drum line, then falls in with what Chris is playing. We are dragging our feet and being met with resistance, trudging through heavy snow. The key modulates up, raising the mountain wall. The conditions are more perilous, the stakes are higher. After another stuttering phrase from Bill, this one buried way down in the mix, the snow squall. Rick's extended, flurrying piano solo makes full use of his instrument's range. It's the calm in the storm. John, Chris, and Steve sing wordless harmonies over the piano. There's beauty in the frigid cold and brutal storm. The way Yes pulls off the transition from this movement back to the rocking slog is stunning. The oscillating synth is killer. Steve solos under the last verse before the howling winds overtake the players. Southside is blanketed in the snow. Flipping the record over, we drop the needle on 5%. If you get your needle drop even slightly off, you're gonna skip like half of this track because it's only 30-something seconds long. The title, 5% of Nothing, is Bill's little joke about how little drummers make in songwriting royalties. This could also be a dig at ex-manager Roy Flynn for booking them too few gigs. They never saw the advance for the first album come through. Roy says all this stuff in the Yes biography. It's a messy breakup, to say the least. Biographer Chris Welch described 5% as, quote, 33 seconds of Brufordian angst. Brufordian. Who are you, Abigail Devoe? This is Bill trying to stretch his limbs as a player, but he's finding the Yes box might be a little small now. Granted, he grew leaps and bounds between Close to the Edge and Lark's Tongues thanks to a round of Jamie Muir boot camp, but Bill had his eye on Crimson ever since he first saw them play in 1969. Considering how his first appearance on a King Crimson album would sound, I think of 5% as his unofficial audition. Hey, look at me! Look at what I can do! Am I ready to join your band yet? Oh, Bill. I still have to break up 2 more lineups. Oh! Now, after the jaunty, angular chords on 5%, Rick is mostly absent for most of side 2 of Fragile. He comes back for the closer. Am I crazy for thinking there's some, like, Allman Brothers Band DNA snuck into Long Distance Runaround? John's given some lofty interpretations of his own lyric, student protests and religion and all. I personally think this song is about life on the road, and a musician's brewing dissatisfaction with the music industry runaround. Long distance runaround, long time waiting to feel the sound. After playing one thing so many times in rehearsal or on stage or in pieces, like a lot of Fragile was recorded, a musician will lose that feeling they had the first time they played the piece. You're always chasing the demo and running from exhaustion. I still remember the dream there. I still remember the time you said goodbye. Thinking back on his girl sending him off for his first big tour, remembering how bright-eyed he was. The up-tempo, rollicking parts mirror this excitement. As for the rest of the lyrics, telling lies and cold and sunshine, I don't know. I liken it to the weed that wrote Roundabout. The rhythm section gives a strong back to John's memorable melody and Steve's nimble, Allmanish runs. Long Distance makes a crazy transition into Chris's piece, The Fish. Just listen to this. Like the title of 5% was Bill's little dig at the industry, The Fish was Bill's little dig at Chris. At one point in the early days, the whole band lived together, wives and girlfriends in tow, and Chris was a shitty roommate. He took forever in the bathroom. If you believe the story that has Chris calling up Yes's lighting director asking for the name of a prehistoric fish with 8 syllables, there's a clever connection here. There's 8 bass tracks layered on top of each other, and the core motif is 8 notes. Chris basically becomes the guitar part with a descending line over his round. He plays with cool, watery textures, warm sounds, and hollow ones. Shout out to Bill for coming in with the percussion. Either a vibraphone or xylophone, wood block, cowbell. And I thought this was a wordless vocal by John to go with the vibes, but he's actually singing the name of the fish. Moments like the fish are why I love prog, of course. I love when bands go balls to the wall with their creativity and have the musicianship to execute it, but the fish is also why I love production. The phasing is so cool. It's an extra element of texture. Mood for a Day is a recycled number from the Yes album. Certainly gives credence to the time crunch theory. It's a pretty flamenco number, which Steve was quite into at the time. Not much else. Of the 3 big numbers on Fragile, Roundabout, South Side, and this, I think this is my least favorite. Which pains me because there's great stuff in here. The core riff ascending and descending in that sharp peak. It's driven and thrilling and shows off how tight of an ensemble Yes were. We don't get any time to acclimate. No wind machines or pretty acoustic guitar flourishes. We are in it. And if John is to be believed, Heart of the Sunrise is Yes beating Robert Fripp to the punch on referencing the Rite of Spring. After hearing Chris and Bill working something shaped like this out in the studio, John suggests they modulate to a different key. Then do a jerky stop/start idea, very Stravinsky-ish. All the different time sigs certainly point towards Stravinsky. There's 4/4, 5/4, 6/8, 9/8. Then play in a different key. By then Steve had joined in, and I suggested to Rick to create an orchestral sound rising out of the riff. This. Then join in. Hear the distressed falling lines Rick adds at 2 minutes and 45 seconds, the chords on the next go. I wish Rick were able to extend this motif into something. I love these chords. Same with his brief piano solo. And the nasty rhythm section groove at 1 minute and 15 seconds. Heart of the Sunrise has no seamless transitions. There's visible mending. You can see the stitches. One of my favorite things about Yes is the pop sensibility that they sneak into the musicianship. See Roundabout, or the Yes album, which I really like. The second thing I really appreciate about Yes, John's voice, that shines on Heart of the Sunrise. It's a little youthful, androgynous, very British folk. He gives an amazing performance on Heart of the Sunrise. This is a career highlight for him. He starts meek, quiet, and boyish, with a quieter and more conservative arrangement. When the drama kicks up, he cries, sharp. It's written in all caps in the jacket. When his voice cracks, the band comes in with a hit. This is a weighty song for John. He sings it like David about to face his Goliath. But in his case, Goliath was just finding his place in the world. Even if you can't make sense of this lyric, it packs a punch, because finding your place in a busy world is something any young person can relate to. There's no proper resolution with Heart of the Sunrise. That is my other great gripe. We could have just stopped suddenly there. But then we have Heaven again. It didn't work the first time, and a reprise is most certainly not needed. And that's Fragile, rounded out by a fragile composition. Hey! The label transitional album comes with a fair bit of stigma. You might think confusion, self-indulgence, petty strife. We do have a taste of a couple of those qualities on Fragile. I also think excitement, renewal, ambition. I feel all of those things as Yes settles into their lineup with their new keyboard player and a drummer about to come into his own, with the three-man front line of John, Chris, and Steve. I recognize I started my Yes journey on this channel in kind of a funny spot. This was the second of Yes's 3 albums in 18 months. They were one band on the Yes album, and they were another on Close to the Edge. I think of the Yes album as the band framing their shot, Close to the Edge as the developed image, and this album as the flash. Fragile captures an excited, ambitious burst of energy as Yes challenge their peers and themselves while standing on unstable ground. My personal favorites off this one are Roundabout, South Side of the Sky, The Fish, and Heart of the Sunrise. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That was our introduction to Yes on this channel. That was Fragile. What do you think of this album? What do you think of Yes? What do you think of this lineup of Yes compared to other lineups of Yes? Lord knows you have plenty to choose from. Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday, Monday mornings at 11, and a new episode of my podcast every other Friday at noon. And if you so choose, you can become a member of the freaking Peanut Gallery, my Patreon, to get early access to uncensored episodes and a little exclusive every month. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.